Dennis Wayne Brooks Jr. was born on December 5, 1973. At 19 years old, Dennis lived in Huntingdon, Tennessee, and was a student at Jackson State Community College. On July 29, 1993, after working the late shift at the Subway sandwich shop, he left and headed for home, never suspecting it would be his last night alive. Later into the next morning, Keith Knowles called the sheriff's department to report that he was awakened around 1 a.m. by voices coming from the road about 60 to 70 feet from his home. He said he looked outside and saw the taillights of a vehicle stopped on the road. He then heard someone say that if the person moved the truck, he would shoot him. He then heard a gunshot, followed by a woman's scream. The truck then sped away, and he heard a woman yell, lay down, MFer, lay down." Keith's wife also heard the ordeal. When Officer David Bunn arrived, he discovered blood on the road, with a truck parked nearby. That truck was later identified as belonging to 22-year-old Stacy Dwayne Ramsey. The truck had a flat tire, and the hood still felt warm to the touch. Around the same time, Dennis's father had reported him missing along with his truck. The following afternoon, Dennis's truck was found burned out on a desolate country road a couple of miles from 22-year-old Teresa Smith Harris's home. Inside, authorities found Dennis's remains. He had been shot, stabbed, and struck with an axe before being burned inside his truck. At this point, the TBI was involved, and they wanted to speak with two individuals, Dwayne Ramsey and Teresa Harris, who went by Dion. When investigators spoke with Ramsey, they noticed blood on his shoes. When asked about the blood, he told them it was deer blood. Ramsey then permitted the agent to search his home, and inside, he found a 20-gauge single shotgun. Harris's home was also searched, and inside, investigators discovered items that belonged to Dennis, including 2 Mexican coins, 1 Grover Cleveland coin, and his truck's radio and speakers. They also found 2 butcher knives, a shovel, an axe, a 5-gallon gasoline tank, and droplets of blood on the walkway leading to the shed behind her house. It wasn't long before a third suspect was identified as 25-year-old Walter Steve Smothers, who was dating Harris. Smothers would clear up the events of July 29th that ultimately led to the murder of Dennis. He told investigators that he and Harris had been dating for about a month, and he had only been living with her for about a week before the night in question. He said that on the day of the murder, he, Harris, and Ramsey spent the day drinking and taking Valium. At some point, he and Harris's ex-boyfriend, David Hampton, got into an argument on the phone. Harris, now upset, asked Smothers and Ramsey to find Hampton and hold him down so she can beat him up as retaliation for him beating her up in the past. So they agreed to the plan, grabbed a gun that Ramsey brought, and dropped Harris's kids off at her grandmother's house. However, on the way, Ramsey's truck overheated, and they decided to carjack the next vehicle that passed. Unfortunately, the next motorist was Dennis. As he passed, Harris stood in the middle of the road to flag him down. Once he stopped, they pointed the gun at him and told him to get out. Once outside, they grabbed him and threw him to the ground. At that point, Harris began slapping and cursing him. They then put him in his own truck, shot him in the hip, and began driving away. Dennis began screaming and wouldn't stop, so they pretended they were taking him to the hospital. However, that was a lie, and they eventually shot him in the face with the shotgun. They said at one point they were even pursued by a police car but were able to get away. They then proceeded to dismember his remains, including his heart and private parts. They also continued stabbing him even after he was dead. The whole ordeal ended with them dousing the remains and the truck with gasoline and setting it ablaze. All 3 were arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Smothers would later admit in a documentary that he thought about killing others on the night of Dennis's murder. He also admitted to telling Ramsey how to dismember the body, admitted to lying during the trial to save himself from the death penalty, and that he seriously thought about killing not only the cop chasing him, but Harris and Ramsey as well. In the end, Harris, Smothers, and Ramsey all received life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hillary Ellington Brown was born on September 2, 1990, in Mobile, Alabama. Hillary was described as a loving, talented, caring, and giving person. After graduating from North Delta High School in Batesville, Mississippi, she began pursuing a Bachelor of Science degree in chemical engineering at the University of Mississippi. She married and had 3 children, but unfortunately, the marriage didn't last. She then met Dr. Benjamin Brown, a plastic surgeon in Gulf Breeze, Florida. Hillary and Benjamin began dating in 2021 and married in June 2022, forming a blended family with her 3 children and Benjamin's 2 sons. Hillary worked at Restore Plastic Surgery in Gulf Breeze, which was owned by Benjamin. There, the staff and clients admired her kind and cheerful nature. Despite outward appearances, Hillary's father, Marty Ellington, described her relationship with Benjamin as volatile. However, she often expressed enjoyment in their life together, particularly appreciating the cosmetic procedures her husband regularly performed on her. However, it would be those procedures that would lead to her untimely death. On November 21, 2023, Hillary was scheduled to undergo multiple cosmetic procedures performed by Benjamin, including scar revision, arm liposuction, lip injections, and ear adjustments. As an employee of the clinic, Hillary prepared her own IV bags and reportedly consumed a handful of multicolored pills before the procedures, including Valium. However, the exact contents of the IV bags and pills were not accurately documented. During the procedures, Hillary began exhibiting symptoms of lidocaine toxicity, including restlessness, muscle twitching, blurred vision, and a sensation of seeing orange. Despite these alarming signs, Benjamin continued administering lidocaine injections. Hillary eventually suffered a seizure and went into cardiac arrest, becoming unresponsive. Shockingly, Benjamin delayed initiating CPR for at least 10 to 20 minutes. Witnesses at the clinic reported that Benjamin repeatedly refused staff requests to call 911, insisting that he would handle the situation himself. Only after a significant delay did he instruct an assistant to contact emergency services. Hillary was transported to a trauma center where she was found to have elevated lactic acid levels and suspected lidocaine toxicity. She was placed on life support but never regained consciousness, passing away 7 days later on November 28, 2023. During that time, Hillary's father, Marty, said that Benjamin seemed more concerned with money than her life. He even went as far as to say that her death needed to occur before November 30th because of their insurance. While she lay dying, he said he was going to sell everything and file bankruptcy and go buy a new vehicle before his credit tanked. Marty said his daughter was making plans to leave Benjamin. Did he catch wind of this and was worried she would take half of everything he owned? An investigation by law enforcement and the Florida Department of Health uncovered numerous lapses in medical care and judgment. Benjamin's actions were described as careless and haphazard, with a failure to respond promptly to Hillary's deteriorating condition. On June 17, 2024, Benjamin was arrested and charged with second-degree felony homicide and manslaughter by culpable negligence. He was released the same day on a $50,000 bond. Restore Plastic Surgery has since been permanently closed, and Benjamin's Florida medical license has been restricted. This means he can only perform procedures within a licensed hospital. As of January 2025, the legal proceedings against Benjamin Brown are ongoing. I'll leave you with one question. Do you think he intentionally caused her death? Let me know in the comments below. Pamela Pemberton was born in Cleveland, Ohio on March 9, 1964. At 30 years old, her family described her as a hardworking and kind-hearted individual who was able to balance multiple jobs as a waitress and secretary. Unfortunately, on October 24, 1994, she was found murdered near Clark Field in Cleveland. She had been reported missing after telling her family she was meeting a friend for drinks. The following morning, 3 youths on their way to school discovered Pamela's naked body in a vacant lot on West 11th Street near Clark Avenue. She had sadly been strangled to death. With no immediate suspects, her case unfortunately went cold. Just 2 months later, on January 10, 1995, 18-year-old Christina Adkins, who was 4 months pregnant at the time, vanished while walking home on Cleveland's west side. Despite extensive searches and appeals for information, Christina's case also went unsolved for nearly 18 years. The break in these cases came in 2013 when Amanda Berry, Michelle Knight, and Gina DeJesus were rescued from their kidnapper, Ariel Castro. Castro was arrested but later took his own life. The discovery of the 3 women alive led to a renewed interest in missing persons in Cleveland. When they questioned the neighbors of Castro, they came across Elias Acevedo Sr. and realized he was a sex offender who had not reported his address to the police. Investigators began looking into his past and found that he had sexually assaulted his brother's common-law wife back in 1993, but she never pressed charges because he was a father of 7 with twins on the way. Detectives interviewed her and began building up a profile of Acevedo's behavior, which involved strangling, keeping the underwear of his victims, and a tendency to return to certain geographical areas. Most surprising was that the sexual assault occurred close to the spot where Pamela's body was found in 1994. Then there was Christina, who disappeared in 1995 and was last seen close to Acevedo's home. He had a long criminal history dating back to 1988. It included theft, receiving stolen property, and a 2003 kidnapping and sexual assault conviction that landed him 3 years in prison. He was then arrested and charged with the kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder of both Pamela and Christina, as well as the 1993 sexual assault. Authorities determined that Acevedo had lured Christina to walk with him on the night she disappeared, taking advantage of her emotional vulnerability before killing her. In October 2013, Acevedo confessed to both murders and led investigators to the utility vault near Interstate 90 and Ohio 176, where Christina's remains had been concealed for nearly 20 years. This location was not far from where Pamela's body had been found. In December 2013, Acevedo pleaded guilty to 297 counts, including the murders of Pamela and Christina, as well as multiple charges of sexual assault and kidnapping involving other victims. As part of a plea agreement to avoid the death penalty, Acevedo was sentenced to 445 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Terri Ann McAdams was born on December 3, 1962. She was from Little Rock, Arkansas, and graduated from Little Rock Central High School. By early 1985, 22-year-old Terri had worked for Southwest Airlines and was living with her fiancé at the Walnut Ridge Apartments in Arlington, Texas. She was a student at the University of Texas at Arlington and was described as a very loving person who was full of life. On Valentine's Day, 1985, she spent her morning baking a heart-shaped cake for her fiancé, which she hoped to surprise him with when he returned from an out-of-town business trip. Once the cake was done, she placed it in the fridge and called her sister to share her plans for the day. Shortly after hanging up, a horrible tragedy occurred. An intruder broke into the apartment through a sliding glass door connected to a bedroom. What followed was a horrifying act of violence. Terri was brutally beaten, sexually assaulted, and murdered. Her face had been battered beyond recognition, and her official cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. A maintenance man allowed a pest control person inside to spray for insects and found her lifeless, partially clothed body crumpled in the corner of the bedroom. Unfortunately, the case would go unsolved for nearly 40 years, but thankfully, the physical evidence from the crime scene was very well preserved and would later be used to identify a suspect. In 2021, the Arlington Police Department, with the help of the FBI, reopened Terri's case. Using modern forensic technology and investigative genetic genealogy, investigators were led to a man named Bernard Sharp, who lived near Terri's apartment at the time of the murder. Sharp, who had a history of sexual assault, was questioned by police in 1985 due to his proximity to the crime scene, but there wasn't enough evidence to charge him. Tragically, just 9 months after Terri's murder, Sharp committed a double murder, killing his estranged wife and her best friend before taking his own life. Because Sharp was deceased, there was no available DNA to use for comparison. They were, however, able to identify and locate a close genetic relative of Sharp. Investigators traveled out of state to meet with the relative, who agreed to provide the team with a DNA sample. The results confirmed that Sharp was a genetic match to the suspect's DNA sample recovered from the crime scene. While Sharp can never face justice, Terri's family is grateful for the closure that modern technology has provided. Timothy Sloan Hovanec was born on July 2, 1985. He was described as a person with a great sense of humor who devoted much of his time to his 3 daughters. He worked for the U.S. Department of State, a position that required frequent relocations. In 2018, he and his wife, Amanda, moved with the kids to South Africa. Unfortunately, while there, she began having an affair with a South African citizen named Anthony Theodora. In 2020, they returned to the United States, and Amanda filed for divorce. By 2021, despite a court order, Amanda began denying Timothy visitation with their children. After filing multiple contempt motions, Timothy was finally granted visitation in April 2022. That same month, a judge ruled that Timothy would serve as the residential parent and legal custodian of the children for 2 months, beginning in May, but sadly, he would never get the chance. On April 24, 2022, Timothy picked up his children for a weekend visitation and returned them to Amanda's home later that day. However, after returning the children, Timothy failed to check out of his hotel and was reported missing. Investigators found his car abandoned near Highland Park in Dayton, Ohio, with its license plates removed. Dashcam footage from his car revealed chilling details about his final moments. The footage showed Timothy returning the children to Amanda's home, where Amanda and her mother, Anita Green, were waiting outside. As Amanda approached his car, she told the children, "I have a surprise for you inside." Her mother then led the kids inside. Moments later, he was heard saying, "What the heck are you doing? Did you just assault me?" The footage showed Amanda pulling on Timothy's shirt and knocking his phone out of his hand as he attempted to call for help. She then held him down, placed her arm around his neck, and rendered him unconscious in the driveway. Amanda subsequently injected Timothy with M99, a drug 1,000 times more potent than morphine, commonly used in veterinary and wildlife anesthesia. She then turned off Timothy's car, causing the dashcam to stop recording. It was later discovered that Amanda had been planning Timothy's murder for over a year. She had considered hiring a hitman before deciding to use M99, which Theodora had procured for her. On the Friday before the murder, Amanda and Theodora, with her mother's assistance, scouted a wooded area near the intersection of Blank Pike and Russell Creek Road, a property formerly owned by Amanda's grandfather. Amanda and Theodora dug a grave there in preparation for the murder. After Timothy's death, Amanda and Theodora loaded his body into her vehicle. Green drove them to the burial site, where Timothy's body was concealed in the pre-dug grave. Amanda initially attempted to cover up her crime, but eventually confessed to injecting her husband with poison intended to kill him within minutes. She also admitted to disposing of Timothy's vehicle and orchestrating the burial with Theodora and her mother's help. All 3 were charged and convicted for their roles in the murder. Amanda pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including distributing a controlled substance that resulted in death, and was sentenced to 40 years in prison, followed by 10 years of supervised release. She was also ordered to pay over $2.1 million in restitution. Theodora pleaded guilty to conspiracy to import, importation, and distribution of a controlled substance, resulting in death. He received an 18-year prison sentence, 3 years of supervised release, and was also ordered to pay over $2.1 million in restitution. Anita Green, Amanda's mother, pleaded guilty to being an accessory after the fact. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison and 2 years of supervised release.